All right, so today I was thinking of, we were talking a little bit about all that DNA stuff because it's kind of fun. You learn a little bit about yourself. You assess, and then you have data, and now you kind of know where things are going. Well, that's sort of what we're looking at here in the realm of assessments as well. So we are looking at client screenings and assessments today. This is going to be chapter 3 of that BCS manual, the Behavior Change Specialist Manual. And so what that's going to involve is like, we're looking at the difference between like screenings and assessments. They're both very, very similar, but basically screenings are all about like how a person thinks, and assessments are sort of like, you know, how they got there. And so like, you know, knowing that somebody is like obese is one thing, but knowing why they got obese, like why they struggle with their eating and like what their lifestyle choices kind of led to that, that's sort of like the important part. It's kind of like, I mean, we always talk about how it's calories in versus calories out, right? Like we know that that is exactly how it works, but that information's almost not helpful if you don't know how to adjust your calories in or your calories out, you know? So that's really kind of what we're looking at today. We're going to figure out like, you know, what is happening, but also the why behind it. And so not a very big chapter. Oh, wait, bunch of dead space at the end. So this, we actually might end up wrapping up just a little bit early on this one, just because it's kind of smaller. But we're going to look at a couple different versions of this. I will say the versions that they are, you know, pulling the lessons from, they're looking at this original, like by these two guys that did multimodal screening. They came up with this big, long multimodal screening method. Our information is based on that, but we're definitely not doing the actual multimodal screening, because the actual multimodal, I think I might have a copy of it. Hold on. I think I have it. I just show it to people so you can see what it looks like. No, definitely not that. Yeah. Okay, maybe I don't. But man, it is, it's like 7 or 8 pages, and it's like really tiny font, and it's just Lazarus's multimodal screening. Oh, look at that, NASM stuff. Well, there's some flashcards apparently that are on the internet if you guys need to study. That's funny, I did not know that was up there. I want like downloads, PDF. All right, I will give this another 10 seconds. Oh, no, that's not it. Well, anyway, it is a very, very intense series of questions to give you like everything you could possibly know about somebody, like, you know, and it's all about the basic id, all that stuff that we mentioned yesterday, right? It's your behavior, it's how you're affected by things. It is the sensations that you feel physically. It's the imagery that you conjure up in your head. It's the cognition, interpersonal relationships, and drugs biology. So there's going to be questions about like, hey, when you're in this situation, what happens? And then like how you're affected emotionally by things. Hey, when this happens, how do you feel? And then it's like sensations. It's like, do you find that you have a low pain tolerance, a high pain tolerance? You're sensitive to light? Like, you know, tons of questions there. Imagery, like what are the types of images you conjure up in your head? What type of words do you often use? And what are your relationships like? What's your drugs and, you know, like what do you milk in your diet? Do you have like plenty of carbohydrates in your diet? And it's like, you know, what's your sex life like? Like, it's like a lot of very personal questions. So we're definitely not doing that version because that is super far outside of like the realm of what we need. But we are going to do the NASM approach, which is like a very watered down version. And by knowing about the basic id, we're still going to have a really good basis for which we can sort of ask questions just in our sessions, you know? Like maybe I don't necessarily learn it on like the first like assessment, but later while I'm working with my clients, right? And then they say something like, yeah, I got really frustrated on my diet. And it's like, well, do you tend to get like frustrated often? You know? And it's like, yeah, I tend to like, you know, get frustrated and I give up on stuff really easily. It's like, great, okay, awesome. That's great information for me to have because now my job is to keep you from getting frustrated. ever, because we don't want you to give up. So it's kind of cool. Like we definitely want to know about aspects of people's personality. So the two widely known methods, I kind of already introed it, but let's go ahead and do the intro slides here. So two widely known approaches to screening and assessing your clients are going to be multimodal screening, which, okay, well, that was actually way worse. Multimodal screening, which aims to develop a very clear picture of how somebody thinks. I mean, it is every question you could possibly ask someone. And then we want to be able to assess someone where they're landing in that trans-theoretical model of change, right? Whether they're in the pre-contemplation stage, like where they're not really thinking, if they're not really ready for change, are they in the contemplation stage where they're not ready for change, but they're thinking about it, like they have like the desire to change, even though they're not necessarily taking any steps. Are they in the preparation stage where they're like, I'm going to do this, right? Are they in the action stage where they've actually tried a couple things, but maybe they haven't been able to find what works? You know, that's going to gauge like how serious our client is about sticking to like a program and adhering to, you know, creating these positive like target behaviors. So multimodal screening, like I said, is all about developing a clear picture of how a person thinks, and the trans-theoretical model of change focuses on like someone's readiness for change. Both of those are going to be sort of what we mainly focus on. So screenings and assessments, really big part of the coaching process, because they help us determine like a very clear picture. And it also allows us to determine like which strategies are going to be most effective. Like, again, go back to the trans-theoretical model of change. If you've got somebody who is like just not ready for change, right? And you try to do something that just doesn't match with where they are in that journey, just not going to work, you know? Again, like if I've got somebody who's not thinking about exercising and I write for them the world's greatest diet and exercise program, and then like, you know, somebody comes by and says, wow, that's the world's greatest exercise program, you're going to do great. And then that person's like, yeah, great. You know, they might say like, great, cool. Yeah, I can't wait to get started. And they have no interest in actually doing it. They're not actually motivated by it. So that's a totally ineffective method to get someone to like move through this process. Instead, what I should spend my energy and time on is focusing on educating this person on the benefits of an active, healthy lifestyle. And so like education is your best tool to get somebody who's not thinking about changing to start thinking about changing. Then what you want to do is you want to go through some other processes like stimulus control, for instance, like maybe remove temptation so that they can see how easy it is. That will get them to move forward a little bit further. So what we're doing in this chapter is we are kind of breaking down these different assessments and stuff, but we're also kind of laying the framework for what you're going to see through the rest of the course. You're going to notice it's like, okay, now we're going to talk about like methods that we use to help our clients, right? Not every method's going to be used. You know, usually you're only going to use one, maybe you use two methods at a time. But if we're looking at behavior change, right, and we're looking at classical conditioning, using the, you know, sit, you know, like treat, using like that method, which does work pretty well. You got to figure out like which type of that tool is going to work depending on where your client falls. So you would have done an assessment first, then once you know like where they're at, now you can pick the appropriate tool. It's like, you know what, because this person is in the action stage, they've already taken some overt actions. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give them something a little more challenging to do, so then they can have like a sense of accomplishment and push them forward and keep them motivated. But if you did that to somebody who's like only just starting out and like really they're on the fence, you'd push them away. So we got to be able to figure out where somebody lands in order to know which tools to use. So in our world, right, we've got the multimodal screening that, like I said, this is going to be developing a very clear picture about how someone thinks and how they behave. It allows us to make like informed decisions about which interventions are going to be effective, right? And oh, by the way, we're going to see that word interventions like a lot. They don't really have like a set definition in the book or anything for it, but what we mean when we say like interventions, we mean like tools in your tool belt. Like what are we going to try, you know? If somebody's knees cave in, we want to do like hip abduction exercises, right? That's the right intervention to apply. It's the right tool for like the job, basically. So that's what we're looking for in multimodal screening. We're trying to figure out like which tool is going to be most effective. And I know we don't know any tools yet. but you're going to learn them throughout the rest of the course. So the other one that we're going to see is the trans-theoretical model of change, stages of change, which is way more fun to say, which focuses on whether or not somebody's actually ready to change, because not everybody is, right? And we got to figure out which interventions are going to be effective to get them to move forward. This is such a classic mistake. I can think of the best time I've ever seen the stages of change really work. I mean, it's something that you're going to apply with your clients, and you're going to see it work all the time. But one of like the just most cut and dry examples where I've seen it just like is night and day was I had a student actually who was trying to get his wife now that I think about it, to work out. I was about to say girlfriend, and then I realized I was wrong. So he's trying to get his then girlfriend, now wife, to exercise. He just couldn't get it to happen. Like she just wasn't motivated. She wasn't having a good time. And he was like, I've written a great routine, and I go to the gym with her and I'm like, yeah, man, but she's not ready to change. Like she's not interested. That'd be like going to me and saying, dude, we're going to make you the world's greatest Formula One race car driver. And I'd be like, what? I'm like, yeah, I've got the world's greatest Formula One coach here. He has agreed to train you, and you're going to be able to be like a millionaire racing cars for the rest of your life. You're going to be on TV. It's going to be great. And I'm just going to be like, yeah, okay, I guess I'd be an idiot not to agree. Sure. And I'd like sign up for this, and then it'd be like, hey, where are you? It's like, oh, yeah, sorry, I woke up late because I don't care. Like they're like, hey, where are you? The next day I'd be like, oh, well, you know what? Like it's my grandma's birthday, so I figured I'd give her a call. Like I'm just not motivated by it. It's just not that interesting to me, right? So you got to figure out like how to push me through those stages if you want that to happen. It's a very weird example, but it definitely applies to exercise. And so it's just like, look, man, you need to like, number one, figure out like what's going on. And so like, she just wasn't enjoying the environment. And at the end of the day, it turned out she just didn't like the gym they were working out at. She felt really judged, and it was like, well, have you looked at like, finding out, like go back and educate her on like the different types of gyms that are out there. And so he goes back and, she's like, oh my God, there's like these gyms that are a little more private and like a little less loud and, a little less aggressive. And so she's like, she got super motivated by that. That decided to like, that kind of got her on board, and she pushed a little bit forward. Then he showed her how easy it would be to like stick to the routine that he wrote. And so then that pushed her a little more forward. And now like they exercise together. Now she's like, she canceled that, and now they both work out at the same gym, which I don't blame them. It's not like a private gym, but it's not a chain. It's this big gym in Glendale, which I imagine like the pictures I've seen of it, it looks like it's packed. And I was like, yeah, that's actually, that's an intimidating environment. So it makes sense. Like that's, by going back and like evaluating the stages of change, he was able to, directly figure out like what was actually holding her back from getting excited. Because to him, he was almost frustrated. He was like, I wrote a great routine. I know this will work. And if you just do it, it'll work, and he got frustrated. And what it was just using the wrong tools on the wrong stage. So we got two different main methods that we're going to look at here. And these are a little confusing just because they sound so similar when you hear just the base words, like assessment and screening. They kind of mean the same thing when we first hear them, but they are different. So an assessment is a process by which a wellness professional understands their client and gathers adequate data in order to formulate a diagnosis. And right there, we underline the word diagnosis because we know that as trainers, one of the things we super don't do is diagnose stuff, right? Like I can evaluate your posture and I can say, hey, your knees definitely cave in, but I can't say, based on your knees caving in, it's giving you arthritis. They're like, I've got knee pain. And it's like, you have arthritis. That right there, like, yeah, 99 out of 100 times knee pain is arthritis, right? But it could be something totally different, right? And that's why we don't diagnose something, because we can't learn what condition somebody has through like a series of questions or through like a movement assessment. It's just not enough like info for us. What are you doing? Go back to your bed. So Assessments are a comprehensive approach that most fitness professionals will want to avoid, actually, because it is related to like determining a diagnosis. So this is what's, again, very confusing, because like we love fitness assessments, but psychological assessments are outside of our realm. And so instead, we're going to focus a little more on screening. So it's like, oh man, like that totally screwed everybody in, this confuses me still. Like I get these mixed up all the time because I'm so used to putting all my eggs in the assessment basket. Like fitness assessments are such a big part of what we do. But psychological assessments, which are used for the purpose of like diagnosing something, not really our realm, right? Diagnosing someone's posture, absolutely. We can totally look at someone's posture as long as we don't use it as a medical diagnosis. So personal trainers are not therapists, and therefore we do not diagnose anything in the world of mental health, right? Now, screening is a process by which we understand our clients and identify any of the issues that actually affect their interventions, right? That affect like whether or not certain tools are going to work. And so screening is a little bit different. This is just basically a questionnaire that is going to give us an insight into our clients' background and how they got to where they are and maybe why, right? So it allows us to gather adequate data about how they think without running into, it says the red flag of like doing a full-on assessment, right? Screening by simply asking like a questionnaire rather than like probing for hours at a time, we are going to learn just a little bit about our clients and how it relates to exercise without diving into figuring out like if they have certain disordered mental faculties, right? So screening remains within the scope of practice for fitness professionals because it does gather information about how someone thinks. That should be thinks. It does gather information about how someone thinks, but it doesn't do it through diagnosis, okay? So that, just trust me, I know that's very confusing for just a second, but it will come around and be clear in just a moment. All the stuff that we're about to teach you how to do, those are examples of screenings. But if it were like, giving someone a mental exercise to try, like you guys ever do like the Rorschach tests? Yeah, or you ever see those? It's like a staple in like movies about psychology, but Rorschach, it's totally going to bring up the comic book character. But you're supposed to look at stuff like this and say, what do you see? That's a full-on like assessment, right? And it's like, oh, you see violent images. That means you're a psychopath, It's like, that's totally outside of our realm, not our purpose. By the way, if for anybody who plays video games, Rorschach test, 2 bears high-fiving. If you ever play the game, Fallout New Vegas, they give you a Rorschach test in the game and they show you this picture and then it gives you like 4 options for what it is, and none of those options are 2 bears high-fiving. But tell me that picture is not 2 bears high-fiving. Like, bam, that's totally what that picture is, and I stand by it for the rest of my life. And I even was so sure of it, I Googled it and found out that the entire internet was like, yeah, it's totally 2 bears high-fiving, and this came right up. I like can't believe they missed that. Yeah, there it is. There's the game. I think it's a bearded, 2 bears high-five. It's totally not. No, that is not in the game. It's something else. That's somebody who modded the game. Anyway, back to being a professional. So let's look at our multimodal screening, right? Let's look at the screening that we are, like what it is we are screening for, right? And so there it is actually. I put a link to the original. Yeah, here's the freaking original Lazarus's multimodal. Ooh, no, the bullet point's in the way. Here's the original multimodal screening. It is, actually, no, it's not. No, this is a good one. I'm sorry. This is a good one that I put in there. This is actually a very decent version of screening without going too personal, and it's all about exercise. So this actually is a good one. It's in your notes if you guys ever want to use it. I couldn't find the original one that we used to use at my old resort, but this is somewhat similar to what we used to use. So Lazarus's multimodal screening is going to provide us with a framework for gathering comprehensive view on someone, how they think and how they behave, right? So when we say like behavior, like that's the basic id, right? There's our sort of mnemonic device here, right? BASIC-ID, basic id. And so your behavior is how a person acts, right? These are like, it's going to be related to how they respond to different situations, right? Like, do you tend to find that you are a very organized person? Do you find that like you like to go step by step when you're doing something? Do you find that you're a little more fluid, where like you'll go in a bunch of different directions? This is kind of a fun one. I love this. You can actually see the difference sometimes. Without stepping too far into the realms of politics, you can actually see a little bit, you can sometimes predict what political party someone will be just based on how their brain responds to things. You tend to find that liberal people, their brains tend to go in a lot of different directions when they're learning. And then all of a sudden they have like an aha moment. So like when you see a movie and someone's like, I got it, right? Like that's like a liberal brain thing. Whereas like you see like sometimes like in conservative brains, you'll see they're very good at going step by step by step by step by step until it eventually like leads to a specific like thought or realization. And so like they tend to be like, okay, well, there's 3 roads. I'm gonna try a little bit of this one. I'm gonna try a little bit of that one. I'm gonna try a little bit of that one. Great. This is the good one. I'm gonna move forward. I'm gonna try this one. And then and that's like tends to be like a very like conservative style, like, how somebody acts and how they tend to think. So it's kind of fun, right? Like it's kind of a cool bit. And what's really fun is like they both kind of come to the same realizations in the end, which is really what's actually, I think, a lot of fun. So behavior is how a person acts. Affect is how a person like feels emotionally. So like, do you tend to feel things really intensely, or do you tend to feel things like do you feel like a little duller compared to things, like when you think of like exercise, do you get really excited, or is it just like, no, it's a means to an end and I'm happy to do it. I totally enjoy all the effects of it. But I'm not like excited to go to the gym every day. It's such a part of my routine. It's become kind of mundane. I don't really feel that passionate about it, right? Both are good. Like, again, there's not none of these are better than the others, except it just gives us insight into like what somebody's motivated by. So if somebody is like, yeah, no, it's just part of the routine. Okay, great. That's good information for me to have. You may not be excited about exercise, so I'm not going to try to like amp you up, but it sounds like you are really, passionate about like the idea that it's just like, this is a staple. So it's probably important for me to always show up on time for our appointments. That's important in general, but it's especially important for somebody who is affected by things like that. Sensation is how a person feels physically. You're definitely going to have some people who have a higher pain tolerance than others. But sensation is what you feel like physically. So the affect and sensation are somewhat similar, but affect is like how somebody feels emotionally, and sensation is how somebody feels physically, right? So, like me, I like running is not an unpleasant sensation because I like really enjoy it, right? But for other people, they're like, this sucks. Like my feet hurt, my knees hurt. I don't like getting the side stitch. Like some people, it makes sense that like that is just their least favorite type of something, right? And so great. Now that I know that, let's do something else, right? So sensation can be how a person actually like physically feels about something. Imagery, what type of images somebody visualizes, like what type of, do they tend to conjure up really intense images that sometimes might like, make like hold them back? I tend to have a little bit of problems. My imagery and my cognition sometimes prevents me from being as productive as I can be sometimes, because the imagery that I will conjure up will sometimes be very dramatic and inaccurate. Like this is something that I have to be aware of for myself. And so like like luckily I've thought about this, but like it sometimes keeps me on task because I will conjure up images if I have like a task to do. Like we've got our 5:30 call every night, right? And so like having to do like both those calls, My brain doesn't do stuff like that very well. Like my brain does not handle having a task, having a gap, and then having a task. My brain is really good at doing everything all at once. Um, so I don't want to like make it sound like as like that terrible, but to use a very intense image, having like a split shift is torture for someone with my brain. um, that is how it sometimes feels. So I have to avoid feeling that way by making sure that I'm like having my day planned out and that I can get all of my tasks done in that middle gap right there. And what I do in order to like be able to do that, because normally it would just overwhelm me, is I just put an estimation for how long I think the task is going to take. And I total up all the minutes. And if it's less than 3 hours, great, I'm totally safe. I got plenty of time to like get my task done, you know? But like if it's over 3 hours, that means that I can just push it to the next day, or I can push it to before or after like those classes happen. I can still find a way to get it done. And so I have to like mark out how many minutes I think something will take. Because what I will instantly do imagery wise is be like, it's going to take 4 hours. And then because it takes 4 hours, I'm going to be late. And because I'm going to be late, I'm going to be homeless, you know, and it's just intense imagery sometimes. So that's definitely something that I know about my brain. And so knowing a little bit about your clients like that too, like do they have like a really intense, like negative image associated with grocery shopping? Do they have a really intense negative image associated with working out? I had a client who, and then imagery and cognition go so into each other. So actually I'll tell you about my client in a second. So cognition, right? This is a person's thoughts or internal dialogues. This is where you start to get into like where somebody's like, I am not good at stuff. I am useless. This is where you start to really see how somebody sometimes talks to themselves or thinks about themselves. I had a client who showed up, and so this gym that I worked at, to give you just a little bit of backstory, used to have mandatory tours by the trainers. And we all kind of hated them a little bit because it was like, you made minimum wage during the tour. But every trainer had to do like 2 a week. It was just 1 hour, it was 2 hours out of your week. But it was like one of those things where you're like, yeah, it's 2 hours, I could be making more money. So we all kind of hated it. But at the same time, it was so good for us. Like, I don't know why we were so stingy about it, but it was where you get to meet new clients and then you set them up for fitness assessments later. You could say like, hey, so this is where we keep the chest machines. Those are the TRX, treadmills are over there. And we would just, walk them through the tour. And we had this really complicated type of like workout equipment called Techno Gym, which is really cool, but it uses like key fobs, and like you get it when you check into the gym, you grab one and then you can plug it into the computer, punch in your code. And what it does is it programs the key temporarily to have your profile on it. Then you stick it in every machine as you go along, and it tracks your workouts for you to an app. And so you can see how many pounds you did on like that chest press machine. So it's pretty cool, but at the same time, it's all machines. So it kind of sucked. Said the, guy who likes barbells and dumbbells. So anyway, we would do these tours, and this one girl, she was fine with doing the tour, but she was like, at the end of it, I was like, hey, also included with your membership, you get a free fitness assessment. And so there was another guy there that you would do these in groups, so they didn't know each other. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do a fitness assessment. And I was like, what about you? And she's like, oh no, I'm just here to use the treadmill, in the corner privately. And I was like, whoa. I was like, man, that like, you could just like, you could feel a lack of confidence. Like, I was like, oh, and I was like, well, if you do, and because this is my job, I pushed her a little bit, and I was like, well, it's included with your membership, and all it is just an hour-long chance for me to kind of show like what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then like what's great about that is like you can enhance your strengths, but then you can fill in your weaknesses. And so she was like, oh, I don't know. And lucky for me, this really nice, the other guy that was doing it, he was like, this guy was like 6'7", I think. He was like super tall dude. But he was like, well, why don't you do it with me? And I was like, oh man, like if she's intimidated by the gym, this giant guy's got to scare the crap out of her. But he was like a big teddy bear. And so she was like, okay, yeah. She's like, can we do that? And I was like, yeah, we'll do a double assessment. It'll be great. 2 strangers, right? And so they came in and we did this assessment, and it turns out like, I was like, so here's what I can see about your posture. She had really, really extreme knee valgus. So like when she squat, her posture was like extreme knee skate. So like she would squat like this and her feet would fall in intensely. And so I was like, so what you have is what's called pronation distortion syndrome. And I was like, do you ever get any like low back pain? She's like, all the time. She also had a little bit of an asymmetric shift. And so I was like, so, based on what I can see, you basically just got some overactive muscles here and there. And then like what really kind of pegged it was I was like, do you tend to like, I was like, this is going to be kind of a weird question. But one thing that we see in like pronation distortion is pretty common amongst everybody, but it is exceptionally common amongst women who wear like skirts to work a lot. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but you think about it, like it's, they're constantly performing like knee adduction all day. And so it just strengthens those adductor muscles. And I was like, do you work in like an office setting that's like very uptight? And she's like, yeah. And so she was she worked for Kaiser in their like law department. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's like, pantsuits every now and then, but like for the most part, I was like, that's a very conservatively dressed place. And I was like, and you wear a lot of high heels? And she was like, definitely. And I was like, okay, so both those things are giving you like this type of posture. And so like what you need to do is you need to like make adjustments here and there. And so we started working together, and her posture got better. She got rid of her runner. She had really bad runner's knee. But here's the thing: her internal dialogues were very programmed to be incredibly negative. Like she's one of the most like nobody disliked her more than she did. Like that was what her internal dialogues were like. She had some really intense, pretty mean imagery about herself. And, it turns out she was picked on in high school for the way that she ran. And I was like, well, what's ironic is like you run great. Like you have a really like fluid running form. This just doesn't look like the way most people run because like you've got a little bit of overactivity in this muscle. So it's causing you to scoop. And then like we would fix that and be like, do you feel how like that's way more comfortable? And she's like, yeah. And it's like, well, now your running form looks great. Like, and so it like built her confidence. She got so into working out. And like almost a little, in fact, at one point I was like, you need to make sure you don't overtrain. Because she got super into it. She got really into the strength training stuff. And then on her off days, like one thing that she also struggled with was some core strength, right? And so I was like, if you want to really enhance it, and she liked group exercise, I was like, take the Pilates. There was Pilates at this gym. And so I was like, go get in the Pilates classes. She got really into Pilates, ended up getting her Pilates certification. And now she teaches at that gym to this day, like as like a side job. It's like her side hustle. And so like she does pretty well at her regular job, but like for fun, she teaches Pilates because now she's so passionate about it. And like she had some of the most intense negative cognition, like internal dialogues that were just brutally mean that I've ever worked with in my whole career. Like, and which is probably why like she had such a big turnaround. I think like that's what led to, I think that's why she also moved extreme in that direction. Now her internal dialogues are a little more like helpful and constructive, but at the same time now they're intense still, and so now they're just pushing her forward into the realm of health, which is what we actually call like a healthy obsession, and that's a term you're going to see in like 2 days. So that's kind of a fun one. I always like to bring that up when I'm talking about cognition because man, it was intense. So then you've got interpersonal relationships, which are your social influences. Like I said, like this person, for instance, like her social influences were relatively small. She didn't have like a very large social circle. So when we built that through like getting her signed up for a Pilates class, and then she also ended up working out with her boss as well. I trained both of them in the end in like duo sessions. And so like her interpersonal relationships were something that like kept her very motivated and very excited. And then there's also like drugs biology, which is somebody's like individual health status. Like if you are in, like, let's say like sensation wise, like if you are in some type of pain consistently, you are making like biologically stress hormones all the time. Your body is constantly in a state of fight or flight. So it is something to be aware of. Like if somebody's been struggling with like exercising regularly and they just feel really run down all the time, right? It makes sense that they would feel run down, right? Like they're constantly making nothing but stress hormones. And so, you know, they may not even necessarily be working out that often, but they're still overtraining. So drugs biology is another sort of important one here. So once we have an understanding of all these aspects of an individual's like personality, that can help us determine which, you know, interventions to use. And so a lot of times these come in like a screening questionnaire. This is a really good example of a questionnaire that might work. So you put your date and all that. It says patient here, but so they're going to put their height and current weight. They're going to ask them how often they weigh themselves, right? That can give us a little bit of insight into their thoughts or feelings around like their own weight. If they're weighing themselves like very consistently, like 2-3 times a day, for instance, you'll see sometimes in really extreme cases, that's a sign that's like, hey, you've got a pretty deep obsession with like your weight. Where's that come, you know, like what's going on there? What's their lowest adult weight that they've like experienced? You know, maybe they've actually been significantly overweight or significantly underweight. Both those things are going to be vital information for us. What did you do to get to your lowest weight? Like if they have if their lowest weight is still like in outside of a normal range, but then maybe they have something really extreme here where it's like, you know, I would do 5 days of fasting, you know, like a water fast once a month. And so it's like, wow, that's a really extreme, you know, take, right? And so like that's, or like I would eat 600 calories a day. You know, like those are both real, or I'd exercise 4 hours a day. You know, like these really extreme answers. And it's like, okay, so like it is very clear that you did everything in your power to lose weight, which is probably why it's been so difficult, because you've been overtraining and under eating and all these things. And you have really intense thoughts related to it. Childhood weight, you know, like over, under, or normal. How did you feel about your weight as a child? Right. Again, that's going to tell us a little bit about like, you know, give us insight. And then the weight, and then this one, I'm not a huge fan of this one, but like, I guess it is kind of important, but like the weight of their significant others, you know. What's great about that is it can just give you a little bit of insight into their history. You know, like a lot of times people blame, we've talked about this in our nutrition class, but a lot of times people will blame genetics on like their body. They're like, well, everybody in my family is really big, and so we just have genetics that they kind of predispose us to being overweight. I'm not saying that's untrue. That is definitely like a possibility for sure. Let me be clear. But at the same time, it is possible that it's not necessarily genetics that are holding you back, but just decades and decades of sort of seeing how like, you know, like eating habits, you know, we all build habits based on like how we grew up, you know. If I hadn't gone to school, I would be bragging about how I'm having a healthy meal for dinner, and it would be a steak that large, a giant thing of mashed potatoes, and then maybe a couple stalks of broccoli on the side. And I'd be like, yeah, see, starch, protein, veggie, but my protein is, you know, massive, and my starch is huge, and my veggies are little itty bitty bits. I would, you know, if I didn't know any better, that sounds healthy. And my parents still think that way, despite years of effort. Any other attempts to lose weight? This is really great because it can tell you a little bit about like, hey, I tried keto, I tried Atkins, I tried paleo, I've tried this, I've tried that, right? It's really great because it can give us a little bit of insight, and we can use that to sort of highlight what works and what doesn't. Any weight loss medication, prescription or not, that they've tried. And then we start to get into like how they think, right? What's the main motivation behind you losing weight, right? At this time in your life, how important it is to you, right? If they put like a 7, you're like, whew, intense imagery, intense cognition, right? How much of your time is spent thinking about food, weight, body, fat, calories, right? All those things. If it's like a significant portion of their day, right, we're getting an insight into how this person thinks. Do you compensate by overeating, by fasting, or using laxatives or vomiting? This fairly uncommon, but you will see this if your client has disordered eating. And by the way, if this does happen, this is where it's definitely getting outside of our realm, and where like our suggestion is now to say, you should speak to a medical professional about this. Again, we're not diagnosing anybody with bulimia here, but if we spot disordered eating, there's nothing wrong with us. You can always, guys, it's not diagnosing to say you should see a doctor. That's totally 100% within our realm. If you have a client who has like shin splints and they're just not going away, right? Like that's not that big a deal, but it is painful and annoying and it keeps them from exercising regularly. You can absolutely say something like, you should go see a doctor. It's a bummer. They're probably just going to come back and say, they told me to ice it, which is what everybody's going to say. And really what you should do is address their posture, but the doctor will actually like diagnose them, and then we can move forward with the appropriate, like, we'll say interventions because of the class we're in, but I would say the appropriate like exercises and routines. Current level of stress right now, we're trying to figure out a little bit about like again, like, are they stressed physically, emotionally, right? What's the biggest cause of stress? Like now we're getting into a little bit of maybe interpersonal relationships. How many hours of sleep do you get per night? What do you do to handle stress? How rested are you? Never. 6 hours, no. Do you have a support system that helps you lose weight, right? Again, getting into interpersonal, trying to figure out a little bit about like, do you have like somebody in your life that's there to help you stay on your goals, or do you have somebody that's pulling you away from your goals actively? Do you feel down? Do you feel depressed? Do you feel hopeless, right? We're trying to, again, get an insight into how they think. Or the emotions that they feel. Moving forward, how do you feel about exercise? You have to force yourself to do it. I love it. Never liked it, right? So sensation, right? We're trying to get into like physical stuff. How often do they exercise? And then, how far can you walk before you feel out of breath? Is there any physical reason that prevents you from exercising? This one here, totally not part of like the screening process, but it's just that last little indicator. Same thing on the PAR-Q, right? There's always going to be one question at the end is like, can you think of any other reason why you shouldn't be doing this? And if they say no, that right there is what keeps you protected. So that's what we're looking for. You're always going to see this type of question at the very end of anything like this. So this is a little bit different than the one I used. The message is definitely the same. But I like this is a good questionnaire. I'm a fan of this one. I have emailed my old boss and stuff to see if I can get the other ones, but I don't think we have copies of it anymore. Oftentimes written and questionnaires are really great. One other thing that's nice about this, and you can see this little tidbit right here, this is actually a test question if I'm not mistaken. Questionnaires are a very handy tool for personal trainers because they enhance your credibility. Just by having something printed out, everybody loves somebody with a clipboard. You just look like a professional. So that is actually a weird and important little tidbit there because I think it's on your homework. But yes, questionnaires have been shown to enhance and just, they give this session a little bit more emphasis and a little more meaning. So written responses are going to always disclose more information than just a simple conversation. It's just like, you have your greatest ideas. You got to write those ideas down, This is why in college I had, have you guys ever bought one of these shower notes? It was a great thing that I had in college. It was waterproof paper that was in because I always had my greatest ideas and I was like, crap, and I'd forget them when I get out of the shower. Now it's where I win arguments. I should have said this, and then they would have said this, but I would have said this. But yeah, write your responses down. That's always like the best way to make sure that not only, again, you're enhancing your credibility, but it gets somebody to talk more, right? You can get clarity, and it just gives somebody the opportunity to really fill out more information. So the multimodal life history questionnaire, right, developed by these guys, Arnold and Clifford Lazarus, and it's divided into two primary sections, the personal and social history and the analysis of current problems. So that's kind of what you saw in this questionnaire right here, right? We saw some of it was like, hey, who in your family is overweight? Like, or what's your history, right? And then the second section is like a modality analysis of like your current problems. Like how do you feel now? Like what's your current weight? What was that? How do you feel about that? You know, things like that. So once we've sort of gone through those processes and we've kind of like gathered a lot of information, now we're going to understand and try to move through where our clients are in these stages of change, right? And so this is Prochaska's trans-theoretical model of change. It uses the stages of change to integrate the principles across major theories, right, of psychological change. So this first one we're going to talk about, and these, by the way, are in your regular textbook. So guys, if you do forget everything from this whole course, this is probably what will get you the most points in the psychological section of your actual NASM test. So like learn these stages. And the key to learning them is actually these timeline numbers right here. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But you're going to see the stages of change show up all the time throughout the whole Sochi program, because these are a big part of what we do. So pre-contemplation, who's somebody who's in the pre-contemplation stage? That is an individual who does not intend to take action within the foreseeable future. And what we mean by that is like it's an individual who does not exercise and does not intend to start exercising within the next 6-month period. So if you were to say, all right, well, if I wrote for you the world's greatest routine, would you start it sometime within the next 6 months? This person, if they were being perfectly honest, would say probably not, right? There we go. That's pre-contemplation. Oftentimes, the reason they're in pre-contemplation is they are unaware of the consequences of their behavior, right? They're really unaware of the fact that like, hey, like eating fried foods every day and having no fiber in your diet is a one-way trip to the emergency room, you know? And they're gonna go, why? I don't really know why, right? And so it's like, well, trans fats, blah, 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 blah. So pre-contemplation, this is where, like I said, like I said earlier, the best tool in your tool belt for somebody in pre-contemplation is simple awareness. Help them develop and educate them. So they do not intend to change within the next 6 months. That right there is the key indicator. You're going to have questions in this course and in your regular NASM that are like, this person feels this way. What stage of change are they in? And you got to identify it. So what you're going to look at primarily is like timelines. That's the easiest way to spot them. If they don't intend to change in the next 6 months, pre-contemplation. Then we got contemplation, which is somebody who does intend to change within the next 6-month period, right? It may not be tomorrow, but they are intending to change at some point. And we can, we can push that timeline. Maybe they're like, yeah, you know what? It's August right now. January 1st, I'm going to get on the wagon, Okay, great. What about September 1st? This is somebody who's thinking about changing. And so what we want to make them do is we want to ensure that they do, and we want to push them through that as fast as possible. So people who are intending to change within the next 6-month period, these are aware of the pros and cons. They're like, look, I get it. Fried food is bad for me. Okay, I read the article. They're aware of the consequences, but they have some ambivalence towards those consequences, right? They're thinking about becoming more active, but they're like, I'm just not really ready. They're like, I'm not ready to spend the amount of energy necessary, right? They're aware of the pros and cons, but like making these changes are like, yeah, I mean, I know that I should be saving for retirement, but I love buying clothes. That's somebody that's like, I know I should, I just don't want to. That's contemplation. So they tend to remain in this stage for a really long time. This is where you end up with what's called chronic contemplation, which is somebody who's just constantly bouncing back and forth between these two. But they're like not intending to change. They're like, yeah, okay, finally I will. But then the time comes and they're like, or I won't. That's chronic contemplation. So we are identifying them as intending to change within the next 6 months, but we do have to be aware it doesn't always happen, So we want to get them to, we would rather keep it as short as possible. Preparation are people who intend to take action in the immediate future. So AKA within the next 30 days or within the next month, if you want to put it that way. But these people are people who actually sometimes occasionally exercise, although it's fairly rare. But they're planning on getting on a routine and exercising regularly within the next 30 days. This right here is the #1 type of client that's going to walk through the door of your gym. So people who are in the preparation stage are the ones who actually walk through the door. It's actually really rare, guys, that you're going to run into anybody who's pre-contemplation, unless it's somebody that you already knew in your life. Like if you're a trainer at a gym and someone is not thinking about going to the gym, you're not going to meet that person. They're still at home on the couch. But preparation folks, very, very common. These are people who are often like, they have a gym membership, but they didn't get their free fitness assessment, right? Like they knew, they're like, hey, you remember you get a free fitness assessment with that? And they're like, great. And they sign up with a trainer and then like they didn't show up for their appointment, right? Like that's preparation on the dot, right? They have every intention of making these changes within the next 30 days, but they just haven't found a way to actually stick to the program. So they might have an action plan, but they might not be sticking to it. So we, again, want to help this person move through and actually take action. They often will either join an exercise class or maybe they rely on like a self-change approach. They download an app, for instance. They're like, I got this app that's going to track my activity. Cool, that's great. Let's use it, right? Like, again, having a gym membership does nothing. Using it is everything. So action. These are people who have actually made overt changes, but they haven't necessarily maintained it for a full 6-month period yet. This is your client who's actually signed up. They're working for you. Most of the time, people who are in action, they're your clients, right? You're not trying to sell them anything. They've already bought. People who are in the action stage, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you keep them motivated continually until it's just burnt in as a habit, you know? Like, it's so funny. The last time I taught this class was, 6 months ago, because that's how long the core is. And it was just at the very start of COVID. And so we actually haven't gotten quite to one lap yet. On day 6, that will be when COVID shut Sochi down. Of this class. So we are like, I guess a little bit over a week away from the 6. We've been doing this stuff for 6 months. And I always talk about one thing that I've struggled with consistently in my life is making my bed every day. It is something that is so freaking hard for me. I'm just not great at it. But these calls have been exceptional for making me make my bed, because I'm like, oh God, I gotta make my bed, like every day. And now the dogs have been destroying it. Normally I got my little, throw pillow there, effective. There's dog toys all over my bed, but but like the last 6 months I've been like consistent, and it's so funny because now I make it on the weekends. I don't have any Zoom calls, like that is now it's become like a habit, right? And so like I'm in the maintenance phase, right? I have pushed past I've made changes, I've maintained them for 6 months, right? So luckily Zoom was this great motivating factor. It gave me a routine to stick to. That's what works in action. If you've got somebody who has made changes and you want to make sure that they keep making those changes, we want to make sure that they're doing it continually. Not all behavior modifications are action, by the way, but if they are related to their specific goals, that's what we're looking for. So we are definitely looking to keep our clients in the action stage until eventually it just becomes, maintenance, right? Somebody who's in the action stage, they're always at risk for falling back into old habits. This is often where we're going to see relapsing and lapsing, which is somebody moving back up or back down the stages of change, rather. Falling down those stairs. So we want to keep that from happening. So we want to make sure that we're there to like continually coach our clients, right? Maintenance, these are people who have actually made that change and they've maintained it consistently for like a full 6-month period. They're very unlikely to relapse, although it's still technically possible. But they've maintained those healthy changes for 6 months or longer. And then we end with like termination, which is somebody who has 100% self-efficacy, right? Like this is not, they don't have really any risk of falling back into old habits. My favorite way to highlight this is that hopefully everybody in here has reached termination in terms of remembering to brush your teeth every day, When you were a kid, your parents had to be like, hey, did you brush your teeth? And you're like, I don't know. You know, right? And so like your parents were there to reinforce that until eventually it became maintenance. And now hopefully it's just part of your life. You know, I find myself like just wondering, like this freaking thing is such a like turns you into such a zombie. There are times where I'll like be on my phone, but like a certain alarm will go off or like a certain time will happen. And I'll find myself in the bathroom and I'm like, why did I come in here? Oh, it's time to brush my teeth. And it's like, that's because my brain is wired. It's like, look, you know, it's time to brush your teeth. Even if my conscious brain was playing Angry Birds or something. Tetris, actually. That is termination, right? You have 100% self-efficacy. Now, remember, guys, like you could fall back these stages of change at any time. And again, the best way to kind of recognize them is look at the timelines. Pre-contemplation, not intending to change within 6 months. Contemplation, yes, intending to change within 6 months. Preparation, yes, intending to change within 30 days. Action, have made changes, not for 6 months. Maintenance, have made changes for 6 months. Termination, you're not going to actually, termination is not even in your regular book. You're not going to see that one very often, but termination is like, you're done. You did it. You changed. You're really not at risk for falling backwards. There is also relapse. We haven't talked about relapse, but relapse is falling back up. Somebody have a question?
Yeah. Do the times really matter of what stage you're in, or can you push through those stages quicker than what times actually say?
Oh. That's not what I thought you were at. So the times don't necessarily matter, but they are the best way to memorize them if you're going to answer questions on a test. That's what I was going to say when I thought what you were asking. Answer to your real question, no, you can push someone through the stages depending on how effective you are. You know, if somebody is like, okay, I'm going to make a change January 1st, you know, that's what, 4 months away from right now. That's insane. So, you know, that's a 4-month period. But if you were to like continue saying, well, you know what the pros and cons are, and I have sent you a couple links to like gyms that you can join, and I've given you like example programs, and like this is what our coaching is going to look like. I'm going to continually check in with you regularly. Then suddenly they're like, well, I guess I don't have to wait till January. And so now suddenly they're thinking about taking action, or they've moved into preparation rather. They're like, I'm going to do this in all right, 30 days. And you're like, great. Well, for the next 30 days, why don't you go into the gym and just goof around a little bit? You know, we'll get started September 15th. But until then, why don't you go, you know, familiarize yourself with things, remove some of those barriers. So now you're really kind of pushing somebody from preparation into action. They've worked out a little bit, but they haven't like maintained it regularly. And then it's like, okay, well now you know what your path is, you know how long your commute is, you know what it's like to check into the gym, how long it takes you to get changed, you know everything you need to know. That takes all the variables out, makes my job really easy. You just got to show up, you know, just bring your body to me. I'll take care of the rest, you know? And now I want you to focus on just making it a habit. That's honestly, that habit of just going to the gym like regularly is such a big deal. That's why I always use that phrase. You guys have heard, this is like my catchphrase, but I always say it's like birds fly, fish swim, and then I say like a third thing. It's like, these are just rules of how the world works, right? Sky is blue, grass is green, and we go to the gym Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. You know, like I try to instill, I've been saying that to my clients for years. That's how I want you to approach the gym. You know, you have to get out of bed, you know, in the morning, and like, you know, you have your routine of like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, making breakfast, getting in the door, going out the door, right? It's the same routine every day. You don't have to think about it. That's what I want for your exercise routine. It's a fact of the universe that we work out all the time. You know, so you can totally push somebody through those stages very quickly. Yeah. Like I said, most of the time you're going to get clients who are in like the preparation action phase. You know, you're going to get somebody who has a gym membership, and, you know, now they need to start using that gym membership. So now that we've said all of that, we kind of have to do like the fair thing, which is to say now people are more complex than a chart. So it should be noted that no one theory can obviously account for all the psychological complexities of how people actually institute change. And so these stages you're not going to see like direct parallels, you know. It's going to be different for everybody, but these are a good framework for you to kind of you know, recognize. And so the problem, I love this, the problem with most exercise programs, they rely on the assumption that everyone is ready for change, and that just is totally not how humans work. Like, you know, yeah, everybody has heard that fried foods, we all know that fried foods are bad for us, right? I literally say it 20 times a week, right? And yet, if you were to put a thing of McDonald's French fries in front of me, I am definitely going to have one. Jim Gaffigan has a great bit where he's like, your mother has never cooked anything as delicious as McDonald's French fries. They are incredible, and they are incredibly bad for you. It's so funny. This is going to be super gross, and this is what a weirdo I am. So insight into my weird brain. We went to I ended up as the designated driver, and my friends were like, we got to go to McDonald's. And I was like, fine. So we go through this McDonald's, and drunk people, they instantly dropped French fries, you know, all over my car. And I was like, all right, whatever. And I cleaned them up. I have cleaned my car since that event, probably 3-4 years ago. I probably cleaned my car, we'll say for the sake of argument, 20 times. And there's this one French fry that I purposefully leave between the seats because it looks exactly the same from 3 years ago. And I think that's crazy. And I don't want to leave it in my house. But I think it's insane. It looks the same. That is a sign that bacteria is going, that's not food. I'm not, you know, like, bacteria will not eat that French fry. It looks the same as the day Whitney Barncourt dropped it between the seats of my car. You can tell that I don't pay for detailing, by the way. So that is, you know, I will always talk about how bad this is. And yet, if you were to put them in front of, I'd probably eat them. They're great. They're amazing. You know, like, so we got to understand that, like, so many people know the pros and cons of exercise. Like, we all know. It's just what we're willing to do. And that's where, you know, that's where this stuff gets really complex. You got to find the right interventions, you know. If you incentivize me enough, yeah, I'll never fall off the wagon again, just like you or anybody else will, right? So we want to encourage specific processes that facilitate that change. You got to figure out what those right processes are going to be, which is where matching your interventions to your client is so key. Because again, we live in the age of information. I mean, people have known, really quick, actually, I don't like, this will be a no judgment environment, but I'm going to ask, anybody on this call, does anybody smoke? Does anybody smoke cigarettes or vape? Either of those two? No judgment.
I smoke puffs.
What's?
Like a vape.
Oh, like a vape? Yeah. So I mean, we're aware of the fact that, like, vaping has, like, negative health consequences, right? Like, and we're aware of those. Like when did you start vaping?
Just like a few months ago.
Right. And it's like, see, that's a classic example. I'm aware that, like, video games don't do anything for me. Like, they keep me from being productive. They often lead to me being frustrated because I'm like, oh, I didn't have enough time to do this thing that I needed to do. And I'm like, oh, if only there was more time in the day. And it's like, well, if only there was less video games. You know? We're aware of, like, you know, this is what, like, our life is really like. We're aware of the consequences of our actions, but we still make those, you know, actions all the time. So sometimes we got to find the right intervention, the right tool to get somebody to move past that. You know, like, I actually have been pretty good lately about not playing a ton of, like, not sinking a ton of time into, like, into the realm of video games. And a lot of it is because I think a lot of it actually is because I'm sick of being on the computer because of these calls. I think actually that's actually a big part of it, because I'm a computer video gamer. But like, I think another part of it is I've been super, super motivated to work on like my own business stuff lately. And that's been more fun for me. And I'm just going to be drawn to whatever the most fun is, you know? And so I think the same, that is, I found a healthy habit to kind of replace an unhealthy one. That's the right intervention that worked for me. But maybe it's totally different for you, you know? And so that's kind of what's fun. Like that's what's so fun about like behavior change is matching the right things with your client. Now, NASM has kind of a unique approach. They came up with their own little model for this. It's another acronym because of course it is. And it's called the NASM State of Wellness Influence Model, or SWIM model. And basically what NASM did here is they were like, look, multimodal screening is a billion questions. No. They're like, let's not. So what they did is they kind of boiled it down, and instead of using the full basic id, they kept interpersonal, imagery, cognition, behavior, and then they added goal setting. They added a little bit more information here. And so this is going to be really good at assessing your client's readiness for change in the realm of, exercising more, eating healthy, managing their stress. Maybe it's to stop smoking, right? Oh shoot, yeah, here's I forgot. It goes through the stage, it puts the stage of change with the basic id, and I forgot the slide was gonna go stage of change first. So here's that 6 process, right? Not within the next 6 months, yes within the next 6 months, yes within the next month, has changed, but not for 6 months, right? So it's kind of like, it goes in sort of a pyramid almost, right? I mean, the idea is that it's going up a staircase, like you're continuing to change. But it's like 6 months, 6 months, 1 month, 6 months, forever, right? And technically the first one is forever too, not intending to change, has changed, never going back, right? So you can kind of think of it in timelines if that helps. But the SWIM model, right, includes intervention strategies depending on like what your tools are and where your client lands. And so it's this little matrix that allows us to put the right interventions with the right clients. So when you're using the SWIM model, what you want to do is determine what stage of change you think your client is in related to how they think, right? And so an individual might have already developed interpersonal relationships, which is awesome. And that's pushing them towards their goal, right? So if we look at like interpersonal relationships, they're totally in like the action or maybe even maintenance phase. They're like, yep, I've got a really great support system. They're always there to help me exercise. Cool. That's awesome. We are right where we want to be. We're far on this matrix, right? But that same individual could still have really negative thoughts associated with exercise. So they're not in a place to change that imagery yet, right? So their imagery is still very contemplative, right? Maybe their imagery that they're conjuring up is here. Ideally, we want to get our clients, as far down this model as possible. And so this is sort of its own little assessment form that NASM came up with. That's very kind of helpful. I'll be perfectly blunt and honest with you guys. I've never really spent a ton of time using this model a lot. For the most part, I like to keep the information. This is totally contradicting what I said earlier. I know. About writing it down. You should totally write stuff down. But a lot of times this comes kind of second nature, and it's like you get to know your clients really well, and you're like, okay, this person has poor social support, right? They don't have anybody in their life that's there to help them. Their husband wants to eat unhealthy. And so because of that, he's pressuring your client to make casseroles that are, with what do they put on, chips and stuff on top of casseroles, all that bad stuff that we see, mayonnaise and everything, and so like, interpersonal wise, like we got to find a way to like, create a stronger social structure. They're not going to get it from home. So I know that instead they're going to get support from me. I'm going to text this person more often than I text my other clients. Right. So little things like you tend to do this kind of naturally in your sessions. But I think if I had the advantage of like using this model earlier on, I would have used it for a long time before it sort of became second nature. I don't think you need to use this model forever, if I'm being blunt. But I do think it's super handy to like help you learn it. Because I had to learn it the hard way. You know, I just learned it slowly by like working with my clients and figuring out what worked and what didn't. And I was, I was so confused early on. I couldn't explain it. I was like, I'm a good trainer. Why are these people so bad at sticking to my programs? You know, like that's totally like 19-year-old me who is just like, I don't get it. Like, this is a great program. If it's a great program, you should want to stick to it, but people don't. So I had to figure out like what they do want instead. And that takes a little bit of, just takes practice. Everybody's motivated by different stuff. And I love that they added goal setting here at the end, because goal setting is such a huge part of our job. And we are actually going to have an entire day just on goal setting. I think next week. I think we're going to go into behavior therapy tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry. Goal setting is tomorrow. Okay. So we'll do goal setting, then behavior. That's okay. Okay. Yeah. So we'll do goal setting tomorrow, and then we'll have classical conditioning on day 5. Classical conditioning is my favorite because it's like we get to talk about, literally our brains are like a dog. Sit. And your brain's like, why? It's like, because I'll give you 20 minutes of watching TV, and your brain goes, okay, great. I'll sit, like it's like your dog, you got to kind of reason with your brain. And so I love classical conditioning. It's my favorite. How you feeling, guys? Do you have any questions? Like so many.
Honestly, I was just thinking like, have you ever had a client where they tell you that they want to do, like, say they give you a certain goal, but they say they want that goal, but they're really not motivated? Like, how do you work around that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's everything we've been talking about all day, right? Like that's every,
Like, how do you personally work around that?
Literally everybody, I think. I'm thinking of, that made me think of this episode of Community. If you've ever watched that show, it's on Netflix right now. And I'm obsessed. I've already watched the whole thing twice because I took my roommate through it. But there's this line where like this one character's like, well, he's like, not everybody lies. And he's like, everybody lies. He's like, well, not everybody. He's like, people don't lie to themselves. He's like, people mostly lie to themselves. Like, and he's like, when you look in front of the mirror in the morning and you're like, I look good, that's a lie that you tell yourself to get out the door. And that's like not true. Like, I don't like, the whole point of like that actually moment in the show is to show like his own self-consciousness, and that's how he sees the world, and it's meant to show that is inaccurate actually, but it's great. It's a great like moment in the show. And yeah, like your clients are going to say, I want to do this. I'm excited. I'm going to drop $500 on personal training to show the world how motivated I am. And then they're going to sleep through their appointments. And it's like, what? Like as the cheapest person in the world, that's insane to me. If I pay for something, I'm going to get every scrap of it out.
Yeah.
I get that from my mom. Just what drives my mom and I crazy about my dad. He's the opposite. So yeah, like how do you motivate somebody, right? How do you got to get to the heart of like what's actually important to them. They are not clearly they are not motivated by the money. Yeah. So having an appointment is not it. So maybe here's a weird one. Maybe it's a social thing. Maybe they have a really good relationship with you. Make them feel guilty. It sounds manipulative. It sounds bothersome, but like, honestly, like that's a tool in your tool belt. Be like, hey, I got up at 5:30 to get here to the gym on time today, like for your appointment, and you slept in. I could have slept in. And then your client goes, oh yeah, I know. All right. And it's like, okay, so on Thursday for our next appointment, we are both going to be here at 6 a.m., right? Yes, I will be there. Like that, maybe that's what motivates them. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else, right? Maybe it's like, hey, you said you wanted to have enough energy. Remember, you said you wanted to have enough energy to play with your kids, right? That's what we're here to do. I know this work. I know these burpees are going to suck. It's going to be rough, but remember why you're here. So sometimes like that is like, you got to just get to the heart of like what their motivating factors are,
Okay.
And that's actually something we're going to see a little bit later, like in some of our other days. I'm trying to remember what day. There's a really, really great bit on one of these days that actually is all about getting to the actual heart of things. It's probably cognitive behavior. It's probably this one here, because this is all about thoughts. And so it's all about like identifying like what your true motivations are. Because that's the thing, here's kind of a weird insight. So I came out to LA to be like an actor, right? That's what I originally moved here for. Thought I wanted to be an actor because like I did plays growing up as a kid, and I always loved getting a reaction out of a crowd. Turns out I don't care about being an actor. What I care about is like entertaining people in some capacity, which is sort of what led me to teaching actually. And like personal training, I made people's knee pain go away and back pain go away. So I found that like every time I had an audition that conflicted with one of my appointments, that was the whole point of being a trainer, was like, I can cancel my sessions and go to my auditions. But I found that I was doing the exact opposite. And I care more about like, motivating people. So then once I realized that, I was like, oh man, what I really like doing is having like a positive impact on people's health, or at least positive impact on their lives in some way. So then I was like, I shouldn't be a trainer. I should be a group exercise instructor, because then I can work with like 40, 50 people at a time. I also very quickly realized that group X instructors don't make as much money. So I found I had to strike a balance there. So I used to do both. And then I was like, well, what if I got into like teaching personal training? Then I get to train trainers, and those trainers go help people. So like that motivated me to sharpen specific skills, right? And so like that finding that you're the true kernel of motivation is what's super, super important for you to keep your clients like on base. Not everybody is actually motivated by looking better. Some people are motivated by feeling better. And some people, they're motivated by looking better. My roommate, like he'll be working out and stuff. And he does so many arm days. And I'm like, you work your arms when you do compound lifts, right? And he's like, these are for the beach. He's like, these are meant to lift weights. And I'm like, all right. And he never misses his workouts. He's super motivated. He is super motivated by looking the way he wants to look. And I think that's great, because he gets all the, fringe benefits of also being a little healthier,
That's good.
Yeah. So there's a 10-minute answer to your question.
Thanks, man.
One more question, Brad. So you're talking about like obviously getting to the root of problems. How do you do that? Or not of problems, but the root of, whatever your client might feel is bad in their area of life. But how do you do that in such a limited amount of time that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it actually, in reality, it does sound like I'm like, you just got to ask a question and then boom, you got it. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. You'll probably end up doing it over the course of several sessions. The reality is that like your first month with a client is really just you getting to know that client. And that's why like you'll hear me say this all the time. I really don't focus that much on my client's diet or even upping their weights all that often. Like what I mostly focus on for the first month is just getting them to show up for their freaking appointments regularly. Like I'd much rather make somebody make the gym a routine early on than make them an expert on how to do a push press. Because that's going to happen over time, and we're going to have conversations while we're working out the whole time, and I'm going to learn more and more and more about them. And I'm going to figure out like what it is I need to say to continually motivate them. It's kind of like any relationship you've ever had, like how do you show your significant other affection, you ever hear like, what's that book? I've never read it, but the love languages, is that what it, or the four, there's like a book all about love languages. And it's like some people, receive affection by receiving gifts, and that's how they feel loved by their significant other. Some people feel loved by being given time. Some people feel love. There's other ones. Haven't read the book. So like it depends on like how like they receive that, right? Everybody's a little bit different. You're gonna learn that over time, You're gonna give your girlfriend flowers and she'll be like, cool. I was like, all right, not a gifts person. Got it. Logging that information away, and I will, next time let's have a conversation. And it's like, oh, and then all of a sudden they're like really into it, that's the same thing with your clients. You're going to find it, I think, slowly. It doesn't have to be a limited time. It's several hours over the course of an extended time. Yeah, feeling good, guys?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, heck, I always think this one's kind of an awkward one, just because it's like we do talk about like all these things that you can do, and you're like, what things? And it's like, I'll tell you slowly over the next 7 days. Normally, like NASM lays it out in the beginning and then does assessments later, but this is sort of reversed. So yeah, tomorrow we'll do goal setting. So we'll talk about SMART goals as a system. We'll talk about long-term goals and short-term goals, and really how to create the right type of goals depending on who your person is. So that'll be a fun one. Canvas is working again, so I should be able to get that up in no time today. Yesterday was giving me a real pain in the rear, but it was my fault. I changed a thing. So changed it back, and everything's good now. So look for Canvas. Homework number 1 will be up in, I don't know, a couple hours.
All right.
All right. See you later, guys.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.